Hey, welcome to the next tutorial in the Trippy Nature series. So in this tutorial, we're going to be talking about how to make this sort of swirling, melting, liquidy meadow thing. Um, it's a fun effect. It's actually fairly simple, but this is probably going to be a two, maybe even a three-part tutorial just because I want to cover like rendering and stuff like that too. So even though it's pretty simple, it can be a little time consuming. So I'm just probably going to split it up. Now, with this effect, I can't totally really take credit for it because I learned it from this guy named Twisted Polly, who is an amazing 3D designer. I'm sure you've probably heard of him. He has a lot of cool stuff. His website, twistedpoly.com. He does a lot of like colorful particle simulations and flowers and stuff like that, which I also like to do. And so he's great, and he has some free resources here. If you go to his website and click this little link thing, it takes you to his Gumroad where you can download some of his files and learn from them. So there's two of them are free actually, and this leaves 10K is kind of where I learned the effect that I used for this shot. Now he did his in X particles, all in Cinema 4D X particles redshift. So I went in his file and I dug through there and kind of learned how to do the effect. But I actually did mine all in Houdini. So there's no point in showing you how to do it in X particles because if you want to learn that, it's free. It's right here. Here's the link. Go check it out. All credit goes to him for that. It's a really great effect. But for mine, I reverse engineered it and recreated it in Houdini because I wanted to learn Houdini. So this tutorial is going to be 100% in Houdini. So that being said, let's get started. One thing you will need for this though is MOPs. So let me show you. Let's go to MOPs. MOPs Plus. So MOPs, if you don't have it already for Houdini, it's a great plugin. It's mostly free. Half of it's free, the other half you have to pay for. So there's MOPs and then there's MOPs Plus. We're going to be using MOPs Plus, so you want to get a license if you don't have it. It's fairly inexpensive. It's like 200 bucks, but it is totally worth it. If you're not using MOPs and you're a motion designer trying to learn Houdini, it's very worth it. So if you're using Cinema 4D, X Particles is sort of like the must-have plugin to do really awesome particle stuff. And if you're using Houdini, MOPs is definitely the must-have plugin to do MoGraph stuff. It just makes your life so much easier. Now you can do all the things I'm going to show you today without MOPs, but the MOPs just makes it a lot easier. So I just want to caveat that you're going to need that. So here we are in a new scene. I have my prepared stuff that I've already made I can refer to, but I'm going to show you how to do it from scratch. So the first thing you want to do is create a geo node, and we're going to call this particle sim. Okay, I like to make the sims green. Okay, and let's dive in and put down a grid. Cool. All right, let's plug that into a PopNet. So the basis of this effect, basically what's going to happen is we're going to spawn a bunch of particles on a grid, and we're going to have a wind modifier blowing it straight up in the air, but then we're going to have gravity kind of take over. So things are going to kind of rise up and then turn around and fall back down. But we're going to limit the wind to certain areas using a noise. So it'll look like this really cool, liquidy, flowing thing. So let's go in here for this first input. Let's change this to 50,000, and then under the seed, this is sort of like randomizes where they spawn. Let's put $F. So every single frame it spawns in a new spot. Okay, so we've got that. We have no forces moving them though, but they're just spawning. Let's put the life expectancy to, I don't want them to last for 100 seconds. I want them to die after about slightly more than 2 seconds, and maybe give them a little bit of life variance, like half a second. So they'll only live till about 48 frames or so, and then they'll die. Okay, cool. Next thing we need is a pop wind. So let's go pop wind. Put that in there. And I want this to be blowing upwards in the Y. And that's pretty much it. So let's see, let's try. So there we go. Everything is uniformly blowing upwards in the Y. Cool. And then we're done. That's it. Just kidding. Okay. So I don't want everything to be blowing up uniformly. I want it to only be limited to certain areas. At first, let's put a gravity in here, because I want things to fall back down also. And I don't want it to be full gravity. I want it to be like minus 0.1. So these are just numbers that I found. I kind of dialed it in earlier to figure out what works the best. So cool. So right now the wind is still stronger than the gravity, right? Because the wind is affecting everything throughout the whole scene. So I don't want that. I want the wind. I want the wind to be modified or only restricted to certain areas. So for that, we're going to use a MOPs node, and we're going to use the MOPs noise falloff. So what this does, let's turn this off for a sec. Let's turn on preview falloff, and let's make sure I'm solving on the creation frame. Where is that? Maybe here. Okay, good. It's solving on creation frame. So you want to make sure you have solve on creation frame on, otherwise it won't show you the colors. Now the background, let's change the background to dark so you can see it a little better. So you can see my noise here, what's happening. So the red areas are going to be the highest area, that's going to be 1, and the purple is going to be 0. So right now we're not really getting much 1. So what I want is I want to get my noise. Let's go. The one I found that worked the best for me was mix minima. And the amplitude, let's bring it up to like 1.3, something like that. And give it a little more roughness, or a lot more roughness actually. And give it some more octaves. Cool. And then I do want it to be, so there's this little checkbox here, I can use time varying. So what that'll do is that will kind of swirl the noise. That way it's kind of moving throughout. I don't know, probably can't really see it. So I think one of the limitations with MOPs here is that it's kind of hard to, like, especially in DOPs, it's kind of hard to see what you're doing. Let's see, maybe I can change this to like that. Give it like a whole bunch. Yeah, there we go. So I'm just putting in a lot right now so I can kind of see what's happening. Let's remap it here. So let's go enable remap, and I want to grab both of these and change them to set interpolation B-spline. Okay, and then let's drop another one here. Let's really crank this like something like that. Really sort of restrict it, pinch it in. Let's bring this one way over too. Cool. And then back in the noise, my frequency is way too high right now. So I don't want these tiny little areas. Right now, the areas that are going to be affected the most are the red, and the areas that are going to be affected the least are the purple. And this is like way too fine. So I want to lower the frequency down to something like 0.052, 0.052. So there, now you can kind of see what it's doing a little more. So let's change this back down to 50,000 and hit play so you can kind of see what it's doing. So you can see the noise moving. So these red areas are going to be the areas where the wind is affecting it. Cool. Okay, and what this does, it creates an attribute called MOPs falloff that we can use as a mask for our wind. So in the pop wind, let's enable this again. So it's not working because we have to go to the vex expressions here. So for under our wind velocity, we want it to be affected by, we have to tell it to use MOPs falloff. So what you can do, if you're unfamiliar with how this works, there's a little drop down here, and you can just hit pass through, and it will tell you what attributes you can manipulate here. So wind velocity here is just called wind. Now I only want to manipulate the y, so it's going to be wind.y. So let's go, just delete these for a sec. Let's go wind.y times equals at MOPs falloff, because that was the name of the attribute that was created here, MOPs falloff, right? Okay, so what this is going to do, it's going to take this falloff here, and it's going to multiply it. That's what that times equals means. It's going to multiply it by this. So the areas that are purple is 0. 0 multiplied by anything is 0. So there's going to be no wind. And the areas where it is red, that's 1. That's going to be 1 times whatever number is just whatever number. So 1 times 2 is going to be 2. So let's see what this looks like now. It's a little better, right? So cool. There we go. Getting closer. Okay, but let's take it one step further. I don't want this to continue blowing upwards like that. I basically just want to give it like a single push at the beginning and then have gravity take over. So let's limit this to, let's put another fall off in here and combine them. So let's turn this off for now. And let's put down a MOPs shape fall off. So shape fall off, if you're familiar with Cinema 4D, it's kind of like, you know, you can use linear, spherical, box, torus. These are like fields basically that you can use. So we're going to use linear. And what I want to do is, again, I want to make sure I'm previewing the fall off. So you can see the red area is where it's going to be affected the most, and the purple is 0. So if I turn this on, see, that's not what I want though. So I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees, and then we're also going to shrink it a lot down to like, let's see, I think 0.2, and then I want to translate it. So let's bring it, let's hit spacebar 3 on the keyboard so I can go into my side view here, and I want to bring it down to like, or bring it maybe up. Let's see. Let's go 0.19. Let's put that in there. Yeah, so basically I want these to start off down here with like the full strength wind, and then as it rises the wind stops. So down here is going to be like 1, and then it's going to go, it's going to lose its potency as it goes higher. So let's see what this looks like. It should all come, well, it's not doing much, is it? Maybe I need to rotate this the other way. Yeah, I think I do actually. Yep, I had it rotated the wrong way. So I want this to be, so red is strong, purple is weak. So I want these to fly up and then stop. So they're not really going to go any higher than that. Okay, so we've got our little gentle push there. So one thing though is that there isn't any, I was wondering why they're not stopping, and it's because I forgot to put the drag in. So right now they're getting this push from the beginning, but then there isn't really any force to stop them from continuing on. So they're just kind of going up and then dying. So what I want to do is I want to put in a pop drag also. Pop drag. And that one can just go here. And let's change this to like 10. I want to give it lots of air resistance. So you can see it's getting this push and then slowing down. Now what I want to do is I want to combine these two. So this one, see each one when you put down a MOPs node, it creates an attribute called MOPs falloff. This one creates it as well. If you put one down below it, it's going to overwrite the one before it. So what I want to do is I want to combine these two. So let's rename this one here to MOPs falloff 2. And then let's put down a MOPs combine falloffs right here. And I want to put MOPs falloff as the first one. And then my second one, I want to put MOPs falloff 2. And then it's going to combine those two and rename them to MOPs falloff. And then what I want to do is I want to multiply them. So what's going to happen is this one here, this shape falloff, down here it's 1, and then as it gets higher it becomes 0. So the noise falloff will also respect this linear falloff where it's going to be strongest at the bottom, and then the higher the particle rises, the less the effect. So let's try that. Let's see what that does. Much better. So now we're starting to get what we want. So things are sort of rising up and then falling down, and rising up and falling down. Cool. Okay. So what else can we do? One thing we're going to need is some more turbulence. So let's add some turbulence in this scene to make it look cooler. Because right now it's just wind blowing things up and then coming back down. It's not all that interesting. So we want it to kind of swirl more. So let's put in a pop force. Oh, not pop fireworks, pop force. Put that there. And we're going to call that turbulence. Okay, and then let's just increase the amplitude and see what that does. Cool. It's doing what we want. All right, but I want this to really respect the fall-offs that I've created. This is just affecting everything uniformly, and it's kind of ruining my setup here. So what I want to do is, again, we're going to use these vexpressions. And if you just hover over you could also do the pass-through thing, like I said. Where is it? I guess this one doesn't have a pass-through. But if you're ever curious about what parameter you want to affect, just hover over it. So right now we want to affect amplitude, and it says parameter amp. So what I can do is just go amp, and then again we're going to go times equals at MOPs falloff. So what that's going to do is it's going to multiply this amplitude by my falloff that I've already created, and that's the same way we're doing it with the wind. So let's see what that does. So now you see wherever the falloff is 1 or yellow, it's going to get this huge boost upwards from the wind and also be affected by the turbulence. And wherever it's 0, it's going to be wherever it's 0, it's none of those things are going to happen. So now we get this sort of like this. It just kind of throws things in the air and then they come to a stop. It throws it in the air and they come to a stop. Pretty cool, right? Okay. Now, another thing we want though is I want these particles to orient themselves in the direction that they're moving. And it's hard to tell because right now it's just these points. You can't really see if they're rotating or anything like that. So the way you do that in Houdini to check is click this little button right here, and that shows you the axis. So right now, it's kind of, I think it's actually doing what I want. It's interesting. So I want them to come up, and then as gravity takes over, they flip around and come back down. Now usually, it's weird, I usually have to put a pop look at node in here to get that to do it. Let me just try doing that, because in previous versions, I always had to set this up. So let's put in a pop look at. And I want this to be, if you put use expressions, you can use this little drop down, orient to velocity. So force mode to target is direction. So this should, interesting. Is that any different than before? I think it is. Let's turn it off and check. Yeah, I think it is. Maybe. Maybe it just does it automatically now. That's weird. Huh. Well, strangely, it appears that Houdini is doing this automatically now, which I've never experienced until this very moment. But if yours is not automatically orienting yours in the direction it's moving, the way you set it up is with this pop look at node. You put it down and you just click this little button, click orient to velocity, and then it tells you have to force mode to target is direction. So it comes in by default as target is point, so you just have to make sure to change it to target is direction. I'm going to leave this node on right now because in case there's some weird glitch or something that's making it orient automatically, but I don't know. That's cool. I'm glad that they're making things orient automatically if that's how it is. So you can kind of see, it'll give you an idea. They're flowing around. Cool. Okay. Another thing that you can do to kind of help you make it look cooler is this node that I just discovered, or not just discovered, I discovered it when I was making this, is called the pop fluid. So what pop fluid does is it sort of makes things behave more like a liquid. So if you're familiar with X particles, there's an X particles modifier called fluid FX that you can use. This is basically the same thing. So in X particles, you have like flip fluid simulations for when you want to actually simulate like an ocean or a river or whatever. But if you just kind of want to fake it, you have this particle simulation. You don't want to go through the hassle of doing flip simulations and having all these things you have to control. You can just throw a pop fluid node in there, and it just sort of makes it behave somewhat like a liquid. So for this, let's set it up. The main thing that you want to control is the particle separation. So let's see, let's just by default see what that does. So right now it just kind of ruins everything because I think my particle separation is way too big. So what's happening is with fluids, they make it so that the particles don't intersect. They all sort of stay an equal distance away from each other. And right now this is telling it that the particle has a p scale of 0.1, meaning they're all trying to stay away from each other by a radius of 0.1, which apparently is way too big for my simulation. So if we bring that down to like 0.005, let's see what that does, see how that behaves. So now it behaves, the difference is subtle, but it behaves more like a liquid. They kind of stick together a little more, they clump, and it looks cooler, I think. And something else we can adjust is the viscosity. So I think I want this to be a little more viscous. So the higher you raise this, the more the particles are going to stick together. So let's try that. Let's go like... Cool. It's looking good. So honestly, that is pretty much it for the effect. So we'll go a little deeper here. I'm going to show you how to put some, we can kind of check to make sure it's working right. But all I did was once I kind of instanced some objects on there, I just set up a camera and got in real close and put some DOF on it, and that's pretty much the effect. It's pretty simple, right? So let's make a few more particles. Let's go, instead of 50,000, let's go 80,000, and let's hop out of here. And for this, let's, if you just grab this guy here, Control C and copy it, and then come out here and put that there. Oh, that's not how you do it. I'm an idiot. I think I just want pop. So let's see. Instead of having a star, so what the star does is it's pulling out my grid and everything too. I don't really want that. I just want pop. Let's see if that does it. Oh, no, it's because my render flag is here. I really am an idiot. There. So just put your render flag there. Don't be an idiot like me. Okay, cool. So we've got our particles. Now let's put some things onto it. So let's just make sure it's working right. So I'm going to, let's put a torus down, and let's also put down a box. And let me just solo this guy here. Let's bring this out, and let's put like a bend deformer on it. And bend also has a bunch of other cool stuff you can do. So let's just rotate this. It's not just a bend deformer. You can twist things. So let's go like that. Let's bring the capture direction to there, and let's put on taper. So we can taper it. So I'm going to make like a little cone. So this is going to be able to kind of show us the direction the particles are heading. Because you have this little gizmo thing here that gives you a good idea, but it's funner to see actual particles or actual geometry moving. So we're going to do that. So what we need to do is pack these first, and then we're going to merge them. Okay, and then we're going to drop down a copy to points, and make sure you put pack an instance on so that it doesn't destroy your computer. So copy to geometry. So the geometry to copy is here, and the points to copy to is here. So let's do that. Okay, now everything is gigantic, and that's because I haven't defined a scale for these points. So it's just giving me the default scale that these are, and I don't want that. So what we need to do is define a p-scale for these. So we're going to do this in a wrangle. This is really easy to do, and this is another important part of the effect. Is I want these things to I want these, when they're born, I want them to have a p-scale of 0, and then I want them to quickly grow into their full size, and then as they get closer to dying, I want them to shrink down, so that there's never any of that like popping on, popping off. I just want them to slowly grow on and slowly die off. So the way we do that, so let's define p-scale at p-scale equals, and then the parameter that we want to use is called nAge. So if I just put in nAge and then hit colon, what it's going to do, let's just see how that works. So they're going to see how they all grow on. So right now the age is 0. They get bigger, and then they're going to get really big, and then some of them are going to start to get smaller and die off. But that's way too big. I want to be able to control how big they get. So the way we're going to do that is with a channel ramp. So you go tramp for channel ramp, parenthesis, and then you have to name your ramp. So in quotes, we're going to call it size, and then comma, and then we leave it at nAge because that's what we're going to affect. And then what you have to do is click this little button here, and what it does is it gives you this ramp here. So now my size is controllable with this ramp. So what I want to do is first let's make these into interpolation B-spline. Let's bring this one way over. Oops, I don't want both of them over, just this one. bring this over to like, yeah, 0.17. Give it a value of like 0.3, and then put another one here at the end of its life, so it's 0. So it's going to start with a p-scale of 0, and then it's going to quickly ramp up to a p-scale, of 0.3, and then it's going to ramp back down slowly to 0. So let's see what that looks like. So it seems that 0.3 is still too big. So our maximum p-scale size, let's go 0.1. Cool. So that's working a lot better. Now, one thing, though, is we have not defined any variance. So right now it's showing us both the torus and the box in the exact same position, right? So if I do, let me just take this one here. So let's just show the triangle. So it's working, but I forgot to reorient these. So see how these are all oriented facing left? The reason is these need to be oriented in the z plus direction in order for it to work properly. So let's put a transform right here. And let's see, this blue one is the z. If you look down here, you can see z, x, y. Let's orient it so that the nose of the cone is pointing into the z plus direction. And the torus doesn't matter, it's already doing that. Okay, so now let's look at it. Should be working properly. Right? Let's see. There we go. So see when they're coming up, the nose of the cone is pointing upwards. That seems to be working a lot better. I think my p-scale is still too big here. Let's go. Oops, no. Let's go 0.05. Yeah, that seems to be working better. Okay, so cool. So we've got one object. We've got these cones. But how do I instance multiple objects on here? And how do I randomize them? So what you're going to use for that is an attribute called variant. So let's plug this merge back in. So what you need to do is, for whatever reason, variant attribute, you can't just create it with an attribute randomize. You have to actually create it. So attribute create, and we're going to call this variant. Spell it right. Okay. And then the name of our attribute, again, is variant. You got to make sure you spell it right. And it is an integer. And we can leave the rest at default. Cool. So we've got it created. Now we have to randomize it. So let's attribute randomize. And by default, this randomizes the color, but we want to randomize the variant. And what we want to do is give it, let's see, want to make sure it's using the ID attribute, because otherwise it can mess up if you don't use that. And let's see what that does. Nothing. Interesting. Okay, so the reason it's not working is because in my copy to points, you have to make sure you check this box that says use piece attribute variant. So then what that's going to do is it's going to randomize each of these things. So I can add in as many as I want, right? So I can put in like a, let's put in a, what's it called? Platonic solid here. And we'll change this one to a soccer ball. As long as it's packed, you have to make sure it's packed, and then you merge it in. It should just update. So variant, maybe I need to go 2. There we go. So basically this number here, it's all one-dimensional. This number here controls how many variants you have. And remember, Houdini is a computer, and it counts in computer language, so it starts with 0. So when it says max value 2, that's actually 3 items because you have 0, 1, and 2. So now what it's doing is it's randomizing between my 3 objects. And with this randomization, I can also, instead of doing uniform, I can do like a custom ramp. So I can kind of change this and kind of reorder how many there are. I can do constant value. I can do I don't know, exponential. There's a bunch of different things you can do. Let me go revert to defaults. I'm just going to leave it at random for now. But that's basically how I did the effect. So let's take a look at that. So see, see these ones right here. They shrink as they get closer to the end of their life. Kind of gives you this really great swirling action. Now, we're not going to be using triangles and boxes and soccer balls and stuff as our final thing. I'm just kind of showing you this to give you a visualization of how it's working, and so that we know it's working. What we're going to do in the next lesson is I'm going to show you how to take some models. For me, I used moss and cactuses and a couple mushrooms and a bunch of fun plants and stuff. And we're going to use the Houdini instance object with redshift instances to take those models and instance them onto the points. And you can use whatever you want. You could leave it at this. But this is essentially the basis of the effect. It doesn't look pretty yet because we haven't added any cool models or lighting or anything. But this is how the effect works. So I hope that this is helpful, and if you guys have any questions, let me know, and I will hopefully shortly release the next part of the tutorial where we talk about setting up our instances and setting up our lighting and rendering and stuff like that. Cool. Thanks, guys.